Hey guys, it is Wingy here, and I'm going to carry on with my redone versions, my new opinion versions, updated versions, that would have been a more sensible thing to say from the start, but there you go, of my top 10 best and worst of both the classic era, which I've already done. Now we're going to focus on the new era, and I thought I'd start with a positive. So we're talking about the worst ones. Now, similar to what I was saying with the classic series, this isn't in any particular order. This isn't like number 10 is the worst or 10th worst and number 1 is the worst. This is just me talking about 10 stories that I really just don't fucking like for various reasons. It's also just my opinion, so if you happen to disagree, cool. You don't have to agree, you don't have to like the list. Even if your favourite story is here, you shouldn't care. Anyway, with all that bullshit out of the way, let's get into it. So I'm just looking at the list in front of me and I'm going to pick a random one, the Shakespeare Code. I don't know what it is, but for some reason, in the modern era, episodes 2 and 3, not always, but usually, are pretty shit. Now, we've had some really dodgy episode 2s and 3s since the series came back in 2005. But for me, the Shakespeare Code is one of those stories that it's a historical, so I'm not really massive on it, not really a Shakespeare fan, not really into witches. It's just not a story made for me, to be honest. Thing is, I will say that there are positives in this story. I do like the actual design of the Carrier Knights. I do like the performances from the cast in this story. I do like seeing the Globe Theatre, but this story isn't memorable. This is just one of those stories where it's like, we're just sort of getting to know the Doctor and Martha and how their relationship is going to go. But in terms of a plot and a story, this doesn't do anything for me. It's just kind of like a backdrop for how the dynamic is going to be now with the new companion. So it's just a nothing story, really. And this could have been any episode 2, well, not any episode 2 or 3, because I do like some of them, but the bad ones. It could have been any of them. Do you know what I mean? This just sort of represents them, I guess, but this is still a shit story in my opinion. Again, randomly going down the list, Dinosaurs on a Spaceship. Now again, is it an episode 2 or 3? It's one of them. Series 7 is a weird one. Now I know that it's had like a little bit of a resurgence recently and people seem to like it now, but overall for me, I think there's a handful of stories that are decent to good, but that's as far as it goes. Dinosaurs on a Spaceship is not one of those decent to good stories. In fact, Dinosaurs on a Spaceship is a shit story. There's way too much going on. There's way too many characters. There's way too many ideas here. It feels like Moffat was like, oh, let's do this, and this, and then handed his notes over to somebody else, and then they were just like, oh, this is all one story, and he was like, I guess, yeah, fuck it, let's do that then. I feel like this is multiple stories all at once, and some of the cast in here is really good as well, and they've just totally wasted them. The fact that you've got 2 robots in here that offer absolutely nothing to the story overall, you've only added them into the story because you're going to get David Mitchell and Robert Webb to voice them. You don't need the weird hunter guy, you don't need Cleopatra or whoever it is. You don't need Rory's dad in this story. This kind of sums up bad Moffat. There's just too much of not a lot, if that makes sense. There are some humorous moments, I guess. The bit with the trowel on the beach is kind of amusing, but I get a forgettable piece of crap that's early on in the series. I mean, the name Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, that just kind of sums up how good this story's going to be. Next, I'm going to talk about a story that I think is possibly a cop-out to have on here, because it is 3 episodes, but it is technically one story, even though it doesn't feel like that, and that's the Monk Trilogy in the Peter Capaldi era. Now, I'm pretty sure this was on my list last time. I think the other 2 that I've mentioned so far, I'm not sure if they were or not, but this one definitely was. And I've got to say, my opinion on this has not improved. In fact, it's probably got worse since the last time I did one of these lists. The problem is with the Monk Trilogy is it's written by 3 different people. Now, usually that wouldn't be a problem, but you can tell that it was written by 3 different people. It feels like they had a rough outline each and was like, okay, well, you do the start, I'll do the middle, you do the end, blah, blah, blah. And this is like the rough outline of the story. But they didn't share notes. They didn't say like, oh, well, I'm going to end up doing this and I'm going to do this, or you shouldn't do that because I'm doing that in this story. Like, it doesn't feel cohesive. Part 1 is fucking pointless. For some reason, people seem to really enjoy Extremis. I don't. The whole thing is a dream, and it's like, an invasion is coming. If you can sum up 45 minutes in 4 fucking words, that isn't good. Like, yes, the stuff in the dream might be entertaining and might be interesting, but overall it's pointless. It means nothing. Or is it a simulation? Yeah, it's a simulation. It's pointless. Then you have part 2, which I would say is probably the best out of the 3. That's really not saying a lot. I do like the fact that the Doctor's blind, and they do play on that in the story. There's elements to the story that are complicated because the Doctor's blind. I do like the design of the monks. I think they're really interesting. Obviously, you see them in the previous story, but I just thought I'd bring that up. The monks are really interesting. The middle part has quite good humour as well. It feels almost Pertwee-esque in places, which is what I quite enjoy, but overall it's nothing special. It's quite bland in the grand scheme of things. And then you've got the final part, which is a nonsensical mess. It's got its elements. I do like the sort of future dystopia type thing that, well, it's not really a future, is it? It's what they're living now. But either way, the dystopian version of the world, I actually really enjoy that aesthetic and that setting, but just because it looks cool doesn't mean it actually is. The story is a mess and it doesn't wrap up in a satisfying way. It feels very much just sort of like, I don't know how to get us out of this story, so I'll just do that. That'll be it. Oh look, Bill, here's your mum. Think of your mum. Oh, was that part 2? See, I can't even remember. It was that crap. But either way, there was a bit with Bill where she's like, oh, you must remember your mum, and, you know, the woman who we've never fucking met. Yeah, this is just wasted potential. There could be a story here. There genuinely could. I think the monks are an interesting villain and an interesting design. When you have too many cooks stirring the pot, it's just not going to work. Let's talk about another 10th Doctor story. And let's go with The Idiot's Lantern. Again, another story that I'm pretty sure was on my list last time. This is just a nothing story. This is in between the Cyberman story in Series 2 and the Ood story in Series 2. Anything it's sandwiched in between that is not likely to be incredible anyway. But it just sort of feels like you've had your starter with the Cybermen story, or you've had your main, and then you've got like a little appetizer in between that is a bit of nothing. And then you're waiting for either your main course, if that was a starter, or your dessert, if that was the main course. But no one really likes that appetizer in the middle. Do you get what I mean? That's what this is. I like the setting of the 1950s. I think that's interesting enough. But apart from that, I don't really have any positives. This is a really boring story, a really forgettable story. The performances aren't amazing. It's got Rory from the kickoff on it, which is random. The Wire is not a good villain. I mean, I kind of like the concept of it, but not massively. The faceless people, I think that was just there for shock value, because it's like, oh no, it's going to happen to Rose. The Doctor has to save the day now, even though the Doctor always saves the fucking day, pretty much. Maybe the sequence towards the end where he's climbing up the tower, that's pretty interesting and pretty cool, but apart from that, I don't really have anything to say about this story. There's no desire for me to go back and rewatch it again. And like I said in my classic videos, if you've watched them, rewatchability is a huge factor for me personally, and a lot of the stories on this list, and this one especially, I just am not going to go back and watch it. I mean, Series 2 for me is not a favourite of mine anyway. I'm not a massive fan of it. I do think it has its moments, but I would say it's the weakest of the David Tennant era. This is probably the worst story from the lot. I think we should return to Series 7. A Town Called Mercy. Now, I'm going to slightly plug my Patreon here, because I did do a review of A Town Called Mercy, and actually quite a few of these stories, to be honest, over on there. And I've got to say, when I was requested to do A Town Called Mercy, I was like, oh yeah, that's like the cowboy one with Matt Smith, isn't it? I don't really remember that one. I'll go and check it out, and let's see what I think of it. I remember getting angry watching it, and if you have seen that review, I'm just like... this story just pisses me off. See, the one thing that I hate about stories is when they don't earn their moments, and there's several times in A Town Called Mercy where the show does something and it expects you as the audience to react in a certain way, and it portrays it in a certain way, and it just hasn't earned that moment. Prime example, fairly early on towards the beginning of the story, the sheriff in the town gets killed, and it's a big dramatic moment, and you can tell it's a big dramatic moment because the camera is above him and it zooms out into a wide shot of his body lay on the floor with the Doctor around him, and it's like, no, I can't tell you the fucking character's name, and I can also count on one hand how many lines he probably had. That character death and that manipulation almost from the show that's like, feel bad because this character died, and I'm like, no, you haven't earned that moment. I don't know who this character is. To me, that could be anybody. I don't care that he's dead now. The only reason he was in the story in the first place was so you could kill him, so the Doctor could take over as sheriff of the town. That's it. He was a pawn in the game anyway. And there's a couple of times in this story where they do stuff like that, and it just pisses me off throughout the entire thing. There's a random costume change as well. The Doctor changes into a totally random coat for the final act, and then changes back again. No idea where that coat came from. Was there any need for him to change? No. Cool coat. but still random. The design of the gunslinger, whatever he's called, he's pretty cool, but again, he's just a bit of a nothing character, a bit of an inconsistent character in terms of what he can and can't do. It just feels like he can do whatever the plot tells him to do. So yeah, this is not a good one. Doctor Who meets a Western, maybe that could work. In a story like this, no, doesn't work. We haven't had any Jodie Whittaker yet, have we? You can't do a worse list without a bit of Jodie Whittaker, let's be honest. I'm still not over Arachnids in the UK. I'm going to be totally honest with you. Arachnids in the UK took a generic and dull concept in the form of big spiders that have been, you know, affected by some sort of waste that someone has dumped incorrectly. That's a concept that we've seen a plethora of times over the years, not just necessarily spiders, just creatures in general, but it's not necessarily the most original story. But is there something you can do with it in Doctor Who? Yeah, probably. We've seen that before. It's called the Green Death. And also, like the Green Death, this story tries to tackle a political issue, but unlike the Green Death, it handles it in such an obnoxious, patronising way almost, that it doesn't matter what you think of what they're talking about, it's just going to piss you off. Am I a Donald Trump fan? No. Was I ever a Donald Trump fan? No. Do I give a fuck about American politics? Do you know I don't? But even with this, I'm watching it like, oh, for fuck's sake, you're not saying anything interesting here. You're not taking like a nuanced approach with it. You're not saying anything profound. You're just saying Orange Man bad. Well done. Well fucking done. When it's something that is so on the nose as well, it's distracting. Now the thing is, if this had a good plot with good aliens and creatures or something, then that would be even bigger of an annoyance, because it's like, well, you're taking away from a genuinely great story. But this story is so mediocre, adding in the political element doesn't make it any worse really. It just adds a, well, I mean, at least it adds something to a boring story, but it's not good. And also this whole thing, and I know many people have spoken about this, and I don't care if you are the biggest 13th Doctor stan, there is no fucking way you can defend her actions at the end. They had a message there that was meant to be like an anti-gun message, and they cocked it the fuck up. Again, it's a nuanced discussion. Did they get it right? No. The Doctor would rather have a creature suffocate to death over a larger period of time than just shooting it in the head. Now I understand there is like a moral dilemma there, but is there really? Because even though you're using a gun, this creature's going to suffocate. I don't think any of the other Doctors would let a creature suffocate. That to me is poor. So this is like the modern version of the Green Death, apart from the fact that they get everything wrong, they've made it boring, the politics is annoying, and they've not even said anything profound. They think they have, but they haven't. It's a mess. It's genuinely a fucking mess. Magician's Apprentice, which is familiar. Now, a lot of people seem to really enjoy this story. A lot of people seem to think that this is one of the best Dalek stories that we've ever had. And I would like to say to those people, how the fuck do you think that? Genuinely, I do not understand it. This story just pisses me off. There are so many things wrong with it. This is such wasted potential that every time I think of it, I genuinely get angry. And the fact that it has fans, again, it just annoys me. So, the whole moral dilemma of if you met child Hitler, would you kill him? Because then that'd prevent everything from World War II, etc. We all know the moral dilemma. This story tries to tackle that, but instead of it being Hitler, it's Davros. Now, first of all, does that plot thread go anywhere? No. Should it have done? Yes, it should be the bulk of the story, actually. Was the kid a terrible actor? Yes. Yes, he was. Did we add things to the story that didn't need to be there? Oh yeah, many. You don't need hand mines. You could have just had regular mines. I don't know why you needed to add an extra element of alienness with these hand mines that grab you and drag you down into the ground. And even that special effect when they do that is terrible. Part 1, you've got planes in the sky, you've got Missy, you've got Clara, you've got Unit, you've got all this stuff, and none of it needs to be there. The entire story is, let's go find the Doctor and tell him that a story needs to happen, because there's this weird snake man on a, what were they called again? They were a big thing a few years ago. The gliders, were they? Sliders? Hoverboards? Can't remember, but one of them. You've got this weird snake man who wants to talk to the Doctor, because Davros is dying. Is he? Fucking is he? Yeah, part 1 is like, hey, you need to get where the story's starting. There you go. It's just a load of fluff. It's bloated. It's like Dinosaurs on a spaceship. Too much stuff going on for me to even want to care. Part 2, I must say, has some moments that I enjoy. I do particularly like the conversation that the Doctor and Davros have. I think it's a very sweet moment. And I think it would have been a perfect opportunity for Davros to actually die. I genuinely do. It's a time travel show. It doesn't matter if he dies now. You can easily go back to earlier in his timeline in the future. So it doesn't make a difference if you kill him off. Sometimes, even though they've been a long mainstay character, or well, not mainstay, but you know, they've been in and out, sometimes it is the right thing to kill them off, especially in the way that this story could have handled it. I think it could have actually handled it in the proper way. But no, Davros has to open his eyes for some fucking reason, because Moffat totally missed the point of why his eyes are burnt shut, literally blinded by war, anyone. And also he has to have a fake out where Davros was just lying and he's regenerated himself, which was so the obvious thing to do that everyone saw it coming, that in fact killing him off would have been the better thing to do, as opposed to the generic boring thing that we expect you to do. You've got all these different types of Daleks hanging about as well. You've got Clara and Missy on a separate thing that I don't care about, because they're in the Dalek sewers and Missy puts her in a Dalek, and apparently Daleks say nice things, but it just comes out as exterminate. Moffat never got the Daleks, did he? There's so much wrong with this story. So, you know, if you do enjoy this story, cool. I don't know how. I don't know how. Please explain to me why this is a good story if you like it, because from where I'm sitting, there's so much wrong with it. It's so annoying. Again, it's Moffat at his worst. Should we stick with Daleks? I'm going to stick with Daleks. Daleks in Manhattan, an evolution of the Daleks. Now, again, this story is one that people seem to enjoy more now. I just don't. Again, it gets the Daleks wrong. I don't think that Daleks becoming hybrids with humans would work. I don't think they do that. I understand that the cult of Skaro are meant to try new things, but I don't know. The Daleks have such a hatred for things that aren't the same as them, that I just don't buy the fact that they would even try this in the first place. So whilst this story isn't necessarily the worst, I wouldn't say it's the best either, but I think the concept from the get-go is the thing that really holds it back for me. That and the setting of New York. Now the fact that it's set in New York is fine. It's just a lot of the actors are fucking shit. The supporting cast in this story have such dodgy American accents that it is borderline distracting. Actually, no, it is distracting, especially in the case of Tallulah, who is very generic British person, does a New York accent. It's not gonna sound good. And it doesn't. The plot twist now when I realise that she is actually from America. But no, the whole stuff with the pig slaves, again, doesn't make sense for the Daleks. And I just think I really miss the times from the 60s in particular, where the Daleks would team up with humans, but it wasn't because the Daleks wanted their help. It was just like, you are a pawn and I will use you as long as I need to use you. And then when I am finished with your services, that is you dead. And I even begrudgingly have to ask you for help in the first place, or try to gain your trust in the first place, because I despise everything about you, because I'm a Dalek and we are perfect. To go from that to this, that's why I just can't get on board with it. And the actual hybrid itself, the Dalek-Sec hybrid, I think it looks terrible. So yeah, there's positives here, I will say. I can understand why people enjoy it. I do like the scene in Hooverville with Solomon where he gives the Daleks that big speech and then they just gun him down anyway. That's the Daleks that I like. And to be fair, there are elements of the Daleks in this story that do question what Dalek-Sec is doing, but I just don't like the fact that one of them would do it anyway. Yes, you can have Daleks that question it, but you shouldn't do it in the first place. Does that make sense? That makes sense. I think that makes sense. Let's talk about the Wedding of Riversong. The Wedding of Riversong is, again, Moffat at his worst. Too much going on, too much bloat, too many plot threads, too many characters, just too much of everything. I remember watching Doctor Who around this time religiously. Like, I had to be there. Saturday, 6, 7 o'clock, whatever it was, I was sat down and I was ready to go. I didn't miss an episode. The Wedding of Riversong, I did watch it as it came out, but I remember watching it thinking, have I missed an episode? I don't know what's happening. I'm really confused. None of this makes sense. And it got to me because I was kind of like, is it me? Am I the problem? Am I just too old for this now? Do I just not get it? I don't know. But no, it's a fucking mess. I do kind of like the fact that they do use elements from throughout Series 6. There's too much stuff to remember, I think. Maybe there's nice... I mean, I like the little miniature Doctor people, but again, even that was a bit cop-outy, I think. I get that the world is messed up, and I guess that is something that you at some point have to do if you're doing a time travel show where everything is wrong. But I feel like this wasn't the place to do it. I feel like you've already got enough stuff to tell a story with that you don't need to add that on top of it, or you just do that and then wait to do the other stuff. I don't know. I just don't enjoy this one, plain and simply. And then last but by no means least, this had to be on here, and it's The Timeless Children. Now the thing is, I'm not going to go on a massive rant about this. I'm going to keep this relatively short and sweet actually, because I don't think this episode deserves any sort of mention at all, because I don't think it's worth it. It's one of them where it's like, it's so bad, I don't even want to fucking talk about it. Now, what I will say is, do I hate the law change? Yes.
because it isn't even a proper lore change. It's not one of those fundamental differences. All it does is it takes what we already thought, moves the goalposts a little bit, but makes it worse. So in the sense of the Doctor, we already knew was a Time Lord from Gallifrey, you know, wasn't necessarily the best Time Lord, wasn't anything special, but we didn't really know too much about life on Gallifrey before the Doctor left with Susan. That was as much as we knew. And the Doctor as a character, to me at least, fundamentally was, well, this is just someone who wanted to get away, and they did. They could have been anybody. Now, the Doctor is the most important person in the universe, and is the reason we have regeneration, and has had a plethora of incarnations that the Doctor just somehow doesn't remember. Yeah, I hate that. I really fucking hate that, and I don't like the Morbius Doctors either. Before someone says, well, actually, it was back in 1976. Yep, it was shit then, it's shit now. Why do I hate it? Because, like I said, it fundamentally changes who the Doctor is as a character. The Doctor could be anybody. Now the Doctor is someone special. That's not really a message you should be sending to your audience. Like, if you want to be a hero and you want to be a good person, anybody could be that hero. That's what the Doctor was. Now the Doctor is, you have to be born really special, otherwise you will achieve nothing in life. But regardless of that, whether you love that change, whether you hate that change, it doesn't excuse the fact that the rest of the episode itself is fucking garbage. The pacing of it is appalling. The whole thing with the Shad, the half Cyberman guy who wants to be a Cyberman, but he wants to make people into just robots, not Cybermen, which is weird. He gets wasted. The Master's in this for some fucking reason. We've got the Cyber Time Lords, whatever they are, or the Cyber Lords, or I can't even remember what they're called. They look ridiculous and they're stupid. You've got the Doctor, again, taking away responsibility from herself because she's gonna end it, she's gonna blow it up. But no, generic character number 5 walks in and he will do it for her, and the Doctor doesn't say a word. Just like, yeah, cheers, thank you, I needed a way to get out and I couldn't find it in the script, so this will do. That's the thing. If you're going to do a big lore change that is obviously going to be controversial, people aren't necessarily guaranteed to like it, and understandably, like, you can't get annoyed at people for not liking something because this is a big part of their lives. People enjoy Doctor Who, people have watched it for years. So if you fundamentally change who the character is, people aren't always gonna like it. But at least do it in an episode that's fucking good. This is not that. So yeah, even though I've mentioned it last, it is probably the least in my opinion. You will be surprised that Hellbent is not on here, but I thought that is more of a linked story to Heaven Sent, and I would never put Heaven Sent on a list of the worst. So yeah, that's what I'm going to talk about. Those are my 10. In the comments below though, guys, let me know what you think. Do you agree with my list? Do you not? What would yours be? Whatever it is, let me know down below. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure you leave a like on it, subscribe for more. Social media and Patreon links will be in the description as always. So if you would follow me on any of those things, I'd absolutely love you forever. But till next time, guys, you take care of yourselves. Goodbye.